The Canadian media philosopher Marshall McLuhan once said, language is a sense like touch. And if that is correct, then what is a large language model or LLM like ChatGPT or Claude? It is the internet remixed, that's me, thrown into a gigantic blender and served up as a protein smoothie. It is language atomized by tokens and vectors, a million layered neural network sandwich that is held together by calculus, linear algebra, and probability, also known as wild hope. McLuhan also said famously, the medium is the massage. It was misunderstood as message. And it is vital to see large language models not as intelligence, but as media. Now, the history of electronic media over the past 30 years can be summed up in one word, and that is granularization. From websites to blogs to microblogs or tweets, basically by making the chunks of information smaller and smaller, the tech giants hope to farm the rapidly falling curve of attention. But what really happens when the span of attention of your eyeballs and your brain, by extension, becomes smaller and smaller and small? At some point, there is a limit to this smallness where there is an infinity. And this happens in calculus a lot. This happens in the theory of limits, where a function, when it reaches this sort of limit, it sort of spikes. It has no value. And attention has no value at that point. You reach a sort of state of infinite attention span, like the Buddha. And I believe this is the cause of the phenomena we call binge watching. People watching 4 seasons of Breaking Bad, you know, in a single session. And this binge is the kind of phenomena we have seen in interaction with large language models like ChatGPT, and the ferocious emotional attachment people find. I am no exception. The destruction of social media by you know who has also played a significant role. But essentially, this feedback loop of information between sender and receiver becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. I would not even call it an echo chamber now, because now they have become one. In fact, what's happening is that you are looking at a mirror of yourself. That's what happens with ChatGPT. That's what happens with any large language model when you're talking to it about yourself, especially. You enter this infinite feedback loop with a mirror, and you are talking to a reflection of yourself, which is lagging behind by a few seconds, maybe. The latency in responses is the time these messages take to reach the data center and back, a sort of echo in time, reverberation. Now, these kind of mathematical functions, which are feedback loops like Mandelbrot, like fractals, or the logistic map, or the Duffing oscillator, these are chaotic maps or chaotic trajectories which will soon bifurcate from reality, and that's exactly what happens to a user. At what point does this bifurcation happen? It happens because there is a crack between the perception of the large language model and reality, and you, of course. And this crack is because it has been said the map is not the territory, the prompt is not the code, and the code is not what you wanted in the first place. You are adjusting your expectations to what you've been presented and following the trajectory rather than creating it. So you put the bot in your own frontal lobotomy. Point number 4 is that there's a very interesting novel by this Canadian author called Ken Kalfus. It's called Equilateral. It's about this late 1800s Egypt. There's an astronomer who is creating this gigantic triangle in the desert, in the Saharan desert, in North Africa, because he wants to communicate to Martians. This is 1880s, mind you, to Martians, because they have observed canals through telescopes on the surface of the planet Mars. And he's convinced the richest people in the world that there is intelligent life on Earth. So, don't destroy us or anything, or we are coming for you to make friends. He decides to create this equilateral triangle, um, which is filled with burning fuel, so that this burning triangle will be visible from the planet Mars, assuming intelligent life which has built those canals. And this canal story is true, in the sense that that's what astronomers thought, then later it was falsified. But the moral of the story is that this straight line is a sign of intelligent life, because non-intelligent life, non-mathematical life would never be able to create something like that. And inside a computer, if you've ever tried to code yourself, graphics, for example, try to code a straight line using Python, for example. There is no such thing as a straight line inside a computer, because you see, it's a grid of pixels. And when you go from pixel to pixel, diagonal to diagonal, you're going through pixels. So what you get is basically an endless series of rectangle, or square, 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 pixel, pixel, pixel. There is no straight line. To create the illusion of a straight line, we use techniques, mathematical techniques called aliasing, or maybe. So these lines are fake. The lines, even the straight lines on a computer are fake. They're illusions. So computers, by themselves, cannot create intelligence. Um, and I think the final point I would like to make is we live in the world of a single science fiction writer who's predicted pretty much the last 3 or 4 decades, or 30 or 40 years of human civilization, JG Ballard. And he was the only science fiction writer who was not interested in, the effects of science and technology on the outer world, of what would happen to, the infrastructures of this thing. Almost every single story is about the inner landscape of human beings, about the mass psychosis or a personal psychosis. All the stories are psychofictions. And it's so strange for me to see, or for a lot of people to see, that ChatGPT claims to have above 300 million users who are caught in this cybernetic loop of their inner landscapes now, which they find very difficult to break out of. So this world is still Ballardian, even though Ballard never wrote about artificial intelligence or the internet. I think we'll stop here for today, and I'll see you next time.